Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video we'll be talking about classes for Shadowlands. Now, before we go on into everything we have to talk about today, Blizzard could not give every nitty-gritty detail about classes and what they're planning to do with them. They've just announced the expansion. So far on the demo floor, for everybody that got to play, the way they described it is it feels like they took Battle for Azeroth characters and just threw him into the world. So the characters themselves have not been touched except for a couple of new abilities that you might have gotten, but the characters themselves are not finished, the classes themselves are not finalized, and what they're going to do with specs isn't finished. But I was able to watch the deep dive video, and here I am talk to you guys about what they talked about in the deep dive, what they plan to do for classes, and all the exciting stuff that we are to get in the future in Shadowlands. To start off, the presentation for the class design and philosophy was brought to you by no other than Brian Halinka. In a sense, Brian Halinka was one of the guys in WoD and in Legion who contributed to the class pruning. A lot of people at some point asked him, hey, I have so many abilities and so much bloat, can we fix the bloat? So then Blizzard started removing and removing and removing. So the fact that he is the guy that's presenting the presentation about class design and unpruning classes, I think it's very poetic and similar to the same guy that was like, you think you do, but you don't, being also the same guy to announce that Classic World of Warcraft is going to be coming. First of all, they talked a bit about the design philosophy. They want to really bring the game back towards what a class is rather than what specs are. A class like a Paladin, for example, in this screenshot, when they were talking about an example, the Paladin knows how to heal allies. They have access to holy magic, they can heal themselves and friends. They also have access to protection abilities to protect their allies, but also they need to be able to smite their enemies and judge them and decimate them with the power of light. Right now, each spec feels like a whole another class, but instead, what a spec should be is specialization of that class. That means you know how to heal, you know how to protect allies, you know how to do damage with the holy light, but when you specialize in healing, that means you explore more that aspect of the class, but doesn't mean you lock out the other parts of what makes you that class. This is a really good design philosophy because it brings us a lot more abilities that we can use. It takes the classes more to the core of what they were, which shouldn't be a surprise to any of you if you're someone who played the game for a while. Duh, you probably believe the classes were better during one expansion or the other when they had more access to more of what a class could do, rather than how specific it feels with the specs right now. But how do you do that? How do you bring classes back into the forefront rather than the specs? Well, first of all, you have to make classes mean something, so there have to be certain class mechanics that are unique to what the class brings. So no matter if the Paladin you bring, let's say is a red, prot, or holy, they bring something that a Paladin brings, so you need at least a Paladin in a group. So certain things like auras, totems, poisons, and curses need to come back, and I'm so sorry for being super excited, but poisons for rogues are back? Yes, please. And I haven't seen most of these auras unless they're a talent for paladins. Curses being widely used for warlocks instead of just honor talents for PvP, and totems. I mean, I haven't seen Searing Totem in so long, so I'm super excited to see this stuff come back to classes. And I think off the bat, that's a great direction to go into. But wait, there's more. The restrictions on what a spec should be able to do, again, fall back to what a class can do, and then that spec specializes in it. Just because you're Frost Mage, you still should be a master of the elements. You still should know how to use a Fire Blast or Arcane Explosion, even if it shouldn't be the hardest hidden ability in your spellbook. Also, if you're a Holy Priest, why shouldn't you be able to use Shadow Ward Death on an enemy? If you are a Shadow Priest, why shouldn't you be able to cast Flash of Light instead of Shadow Mend? And what about different weapons and choices of different abilities? What if you could be a Fury Warrior, but if need arises, put on a shield block, and protect your allies for just a moment, or even give elemental shamans a melee ability. So off the bat, oh man, the nostalgia just was coursing through me. The excitement of bringing back all these old abilities, even if it's not something that we'll be using at endgame, it's super good to have them talk about it. Now, we talked a lot so far about useful abilities and the design philosophy, but whatever happened to fun abilities that were defining for what a class could do? Not something that was incredible for gameplay or super rudimentary. Right now we are only using the most important abilities in the game, but what if you had a spell or two that you would use once in a while? It has some uses, but it was more a flavor thing. I think there's a couple abilities you might have thought of before, especially if you played older expansions. Well, Blizzard decided that yes, we are going to be bringing certain abilities that are simply part of the flavor of the class. Some of the examples they brought were Raise Dead for Death Knights, even if you're not unholy, is making a comeback. And why can't all shamans use Frost Shock? Consecration, maybe it is a protection paladin specific ability, but why can't Retribution have a baseline? Ursol's Vortex, which is actually huge for Mythic Pluses, would give every druid a massive upper hand within PvE content. And Shiv, this is an honor talent, which is good that we've seen honor talents making their way back into the base toolkit. That is exceptionally good. Love you for that, Blizzard. And Death Coil, which it looks like is the Death Knight Death Coil, but what if this was the Warlock Death Coil, which was the original animation or original icon for it? What if that was a basic Warlock ability without having to talent into it? I think a lot of us can agree that probably one of the worst ideas for classes that Blizzard ever has done is to put base abilities that were part of what your class or even spec could do and take them out of the game and add them towards a talent tree. Now, instead of basically having that ability as part of your toolkit, you have to choose between that ability and two that are supposed to be competitive. Sometimes they are, but most of the times it's not. Either way, it is never fun losing abilities. And it is confirmed, yes, they're going to be taking a lot of the talents and honor talents back towards the basic toolkit of a class. So this is what they meant when it comes to adding more abilities to classes, but some of them are. We have Demonic Circle for Warlocks, Summon Gargoyle for Death Knights, Hunter's Mark, which I think would go to Marksman and maybe Beast Mastery, Hammer of Wrath for Retribution Paladin, but maybe all 3 specs of Paladin, Cyclone getting taken off the honor talents for all 4 specs of Druid, Anti-Magic Zone also being taken off the honor talents for Death Knights, which was insane. Imagine if a Death Knight could bring Anti-Magic Zone inside of a dungeon. Oh my god, some of the bosses would just become a joke. And then they want to continue a trend of bringing even more abilities, what they call the long lost friends, back into the fold. So things like Shattering Throw, Kill Shot, Ritual of Doom, Challenging Shout, and even Eyes of the Beast are making a comeback. I think this is probably the coolest thing ever, just to bring abilities that might be useful in a very specific situation back. Like, for example, how many hunters are going to be using Eyes of the Beast a lot? What the ability Eyes of the Beast used to do is it lets you see through the eyes of your pet, and in a sense mind control them for a limited amount of time. You'll be able to use certain pet abilities while they are mind controlled, and it's not an ability you would use in combat. It's not like there was a raid or a dungeon where you needed to use Eyes of the Beast in order to fight as your pet. And even in PvP, it's a lot better for you to fight with your pet than fight only as your pet, since your pet doesn't do nearly as much damage as you do. Or in case of Beast Mastery, it only does damage whenever you use certain abilities to make it do more damage. But it's a cool, flavorful ability, and it's awesome, and it's just something very simple, very quaint, and it's something that only a hunter can do. So more things like this, and even smaller abilities with specific uses for classes, the more of those come back, the better a lot of us will feel about how our classes plays, what our classes are supposed to do. And it's very, very exciting to see things kind of come back to the fold. It's been so long, and I think Blizzard has tried different gimmicks in order to make classes feel more fulfilled. So far, I feel like the only gimmick that really worked well was the artifact weapon. The variety of passives and one active ability that it offered was mostly enough for classes to feel full and comprehensive. The Battle for Azeroth, I feel like with 8.2, the Essence system together with the trade system isn't a bad alternative, but definitely not as good as having all these abilities, whether they were part of our regular rotation or simply just a flavor option. Now, there's probably a couple spells that are missing that Blizzard hasn't mentioned so far in the presentation. Some abilities that probably should come back to classes. You guys are more than welcome to let me know in the comments what abilities you think they probably should bring back to the game. Whether it's an awesome ability you used to use back in the day, a flavorful ability, maybe just something for fun, something that was removed a while ago and you kind of just miss it. Feel like you're missing from your class and what your class could do. But anyway guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed. It's super fun to see so many abilities making a comeback in Shadowlands. Already feeling like it's going to be a really good expansion. Already feels like Blizzard has a right mindset when it comes to what they want to do for classes for this next new expansion. And the unpruning that really must take place. Maybe all this unpruning might be worth enough to not have a brand new class. Maybe just let them take the time to unprune the classes, and then we can have a new class in the next expansion. But thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see all of you guys in another video.